Well, hello and welcome to the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint live series. My name is Guy Stevens. I am the founder, executive director, and the host of the podcast. We actually had a false start here a moment ago. I was broadcasting live only to realize that I wasn't, in fact, live. So we're starting a couple minutes late here. Fortunately, it didn't get too far along. Those of you that are not familiar with the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, we were formed about 5.5 years ago. We focus on issues like restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment in schools. Although we care about things like restraint, seclusion wherever they might happen, we do a lot of work in schools and educational settings, really trying to create better environments for students, teachers, and staff. We do a lot of work advocating for changes in policy and practice, and ultimately trying to influence a positive change. We have a special guest with us today, and we're going to be talking about a brand new book called Step Into My Shoes. Our guest is going to be Rebecca Engle, who I'll introduce here in just a moment. But before I introduce our guest, a few announcements and housekeeping items. Those of you that are regular viewers of the show, you probably know, but we do these live. We do them live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and on YouTube. And of course, you can watch them live. But if you don't have time to watch the whole thing live, you can go back after the fact, watch it on any of those platforms. Or if you watch it and think, this is really good, I need to share it with my friend, you can go and share the link with a friend. We, in fact, always encourage that. We want you to share these with fellow families, caregivers, self-advocates, educators, whoever you might be. Sharing these things, I think, really just spreads the reach of what we're doing. So always important. A couple other quick announcements before we get started. I wanted to mention, and some of you may already know about this, but we have planned an exciting event coming up for early next year. The event is a conference. The conference is called Supporting All Brains: How Neuroscience and Neurodiversity Affirming Approaches Can Better Support All Students, Teachers, and Staff. Tickets are available now. They're $29 for not only a full day of great presentations. You're actually even going to get a few more, I think 4 bonus sessions as well that'll be available after the fact. If you are able to attend live, it's happening on January 20th. And it's all day, 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern time here in the United States. And of course, we did make it so that you can access it after the fact on our learning management platform. So if 8:30 in the morning here is the middle of the night where you are, you'll be able to watch any portion of it live. Any portion of it will be pre-recorded as well. And we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers. I won't go into who they all are right now, but we have Dr. Lori Desautel. We've got a lot of fantastic speakers that are coming and presenting various topics for us. I think it'll be a fantastic event. Encourage you to join us. We also have some amazing sponsors for the event as well, and a number of giveaways. So if you attend, you might receive a signed book or a training or something else along those veins. So lots of great stuff. Wanted to mention that. One other thing to mention here, and this is, we're reaching the end of the year here. It's December 16th here. You might be listening on a different day, but we are nearing the end of the year. And just wanted to mention to you that, our work is work that happens really with support. And it happens with support from people like you that might be joining us for the podcast. It happens with support from people that find the work that we're doing valuable. And did want to let you know that we have a end of year campaign, and that is really to get donations and support to help us continue to do this work. And we'll share a link to this in the chat, but would encourage you to visit this. And if you're able to click that donate button and make a donation, you can make a one-time donation or a monthly donation. Without help and support, we can't continue to do this work, and it is important work, and it needs to be done. And I would just ask you to consider, if you would, as you're thinking about end of the year giving, making a small donation to help us do this work. So with that, let's get to why we are here today. And I want to go ahead and bring up my special guest. And I'm going to read an intro here. And there's Becca. Hey, Becca. So let me, pull up your introduction here. And I'm just going to read a short bio, and then we'll get started. So Rebecca Engle is a graduate student at Texas Tech University who is passionate about educational policy and leadership, also currently an educator as well. Rebecca has made history in Texas politics at 19 and is devoted to advocating for positive change. Alongside her studies, Rebecca is a neurodivergent public speaker, creative writer. She actively serves her community, supports women in business, and nurtures young minds as a special education teacher. It is there. Look at that. Rebecca's goal is to inspire and collaborate for a brighter future. And one other thing there, not in the bio, Rebecca is also, and I'm going to call you Becca here, get a little less formal. Becca is also an Alliance Against Exclusion and Restraint volunteer and have been a volunteer with us for some time. So, Becca, thank you for joining us here today. I'm excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here.
So, we are going to be talking about this. We're going to be talking about your brand new book, and brand new books are exciting. We both have our copy there. So, you wrote a children's book called "Step into My Shoes." And this is a beautiful illustrated book that is now available on Amazon, probably elsewhere as well. But this book is a book that I think you brought into the world, kind of somewhat based on some of your own experiences. So why don't you tell us a little bit? And we're actually going to do a read through here of the book here in a few minutes. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what led to the idea of to write a book and led to the idea of writing this book, "Step into My Shoes"?
Sure. So, as a young girl, I was diagnosed with PDD-NOS, which is pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. PDD-NOS is now on the autism spectrum. It's no longer diagnosed. Um, I faced sensory disorders, speech impairments, developmental delays. I didn't speak until I was 4. By the age of 5, I only said 22 words. Doctors believed I'd never be verbal or independent. Um, and so I went into early childhood special education. In kindergarten, I was considered a special ed student all the way till 5th grade. Um, and then later, again at 22, I was diagnosed with level 1 autism. And so uh, the diagnosis is still valid to this day. Um, and I struggle still to this day with social communication disorders, um, and recognizing social communication uh, nonverbals and verbal signals.
Hmm. And the book, kind of shares, and we're gonna go through the book here in a minute, but I'm gonna guess that some of the things shared here in the book really kind of mirrored some of the experiences that you had, and as you're talking about kind of diagnoses and your own experience, so much of what I think this points out is a world that needs to change, not necessarily autistic individuals that need to change, but for people to understand individual differences. And that's one of the things, and I'm guessing you're at school and that's a bell, huh? And bells
Yeah.
don't sound like they used to, but that's okay. So, part of this is really how do we bring awareness? How do we share with people our stories? And this is a beautiful way to do it because you're sharing your story, as a student. And of course now, full circle, you spent your career, or excuse me, you spent your education getting a teaching degree and learning education policy, and now you're in a classroom. So let's talk a little bit about that before we dive more into the book. But how did the experience that you had as a neurodivergent individual then influence you as an educator? What are you learning now that you're in the classroom, and how are you maybe applying some of the things and the experiences that you had?
Yeah. So I try to incorporate my students as much as I can into their general education classroom. Their gen ed peers are always welcome to come into my room um, when they feel like it. Um, I also teach them about their goals. So, one of the things I lacked was I never knew what my goals were. I had no idea what an IEP was. Um, no one told me that I was different. I kind of just knew I was different and I had a diagnosis. But nobody told me, like, oh, you have different goals than these kids. This is what you're working towards. And I'm very good about implementing my students' goals in their day to day. All of my kids know what their goals are. They talk to me about their goals, and we work to achieve them together. I do a lot of one on one meetings with all of my special ed students, just to talk about what they want to achieve and what they want to see in themselves. Um, you know, I think even as adults, if we don't know what our goal is, then how do we know what we're working towards, and how do we know why we should be working towards something? And so I make it very clear um, that, this piece of paper is there to help them and support them, and that I'm only communicating their brain down with the words. Um, And I think that that's something I lack, and I lacked when I was a kid. And I think it's something that is that they need to be thrown into a alternative classroom or a full day's bedroom, and see that seclusion. And we still see that to this day. And I'm constantly advocating for all of my kids to stay in that general ed setting.
Mm-hmm. You said something that really resonated with me, and that's kind of now what grade levels are you working with?
I work all the way from first to fifth grade, but
So
mostly
so
third through fifth.
so you're working in an elementary setting, and one of the things that you mentioned that I don't think is by any means standard practice, but I love it, is making kids aware of what their goals are. And even beyond that, maybe even some of what their rights might be. And what I mean by that is, my son had an IEP throughout school, and at one point I took his IEP, which was very long, and I condensed it down to a one-page kind of summary of his rights and accommodations, right? I wanted him to understand, like, if he was having a hard time, that he had the right to ask to go into a different setting or whatever it may be. And we took it all and we boiled it down to like a single page. It was not worded in an IEP ease, but just kind of very understandable. And I think it's important, and I think people don't think about that, especially for young children. And I think it's a really important thing that you're doing in teaching them, because not only are you teaching them to be aware of what some of their goals are and what some of their rights and accommodations might be, you're also helping them to learn to advocate for that, which I believe is really important. And I applaud you for doing that. What's interesting though, and I'm curious what your experience is. Um, I actually found something kind of surprising. At least it was surprising to me at the time, and that was that not all educators were excited about a kid that wanted to advocate for their rights. There were times that it actually backfired a little bit on him, knowing what some of these accommodations were. And I only mean from the sense of, like, people sometimes were resistant to a kid that was saying, "Hey, it says that I can do this and I should be able to do this." Have you ever run into that kind of thing, either yourself or with kids that you've worked with? And how do you educate the adults? Because some of this work is about changing adult mindsets, right?
Yes.
Um,
I promise that's the last bell,
oh,
guys.
that's okay. That's okay.
Um,
Bells are fine. We're in a school. It should happen. Oops, but it looks like you froze there for a second. Let me see if you come unfrozen here. Uh, we'll give this just a second. I don't know if it's
there you
me.
go.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
all right. And so, yeah, I ran into that myself. So I had accommodations in elementary school and in college. One of my college accommodations was that I could not drive more than 30 minutes uh, to a field-based location, um, and on back roads. So if the location took me more than 30 minutes to get to on back roads, I was not allowed to go there because of a foot disability. And I still have that driving rule, like for myself, and whether I'm in school or not. And I had many uh, professors that were like, well, that doesn't apply to this. Just find a ride.
Hmm, hmm,
And then, you'd find a ride and that person was sick. So how does that impact my grade?
hmm, hmm,
Am I going to fail now because you didn't accommodate me? And this happened all the time. And advocating for myself was definitely hard because they would, hold something up against you. Like,
hmm, hmm, hmm,
eventually they told me I couldn't clinical teach due to constantly fighting for my rights.
hmm, hmm,
And so I had to go in the alternative certification route. Um, but I've seen it also as a teacher, especially now that this year, I've told kids, like, you have access to these tools, you have access to these resources. Many kids had no idea that they had access to those things, and they've really started asking for them, and they'll come to my room and grab them. And it took a while for them to get used to being able to do it, but
hmm.
thankfully it's all been positive so far.
That's
Like, the
great.
kids are really adjusting to being able to ask.
Hmm,
I have a coat rack full of noise canceling headphones, and there was a movie night on campus and I wasn't here. It was like 6 at night, And my assistant principal came with kids that asked for noise canceling headphones to my room and grabbed a bunch of noise canceling headphones.
Because they
And
knew that that was something they could ask for. Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that, they were just able to know, like, I'm allowed to go to Miss Engle's room even at 6:30 at night for a movie night
Mm.
and use the tools that are available to me, even when I'm not in that educational setting.
Yeah, I
And
love
I
that. I
think
love that.
that, I think that's the power of being a special education teacher with special needs. Um, but I've definitely, even when I was in the daycare setting prior to becoming a teacher, saw the backlash. I saw it as a field-based teacher, just getting my experience in before I was in the classroom. It's scary that there's teachers out there that don't want their students to um, be able to advocate for what they need and what's
Yeah.
best for their education.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens because there's such a focus on compliance. One of my least favorite words in the world. People are so focused on compliance that when somebody begins to advocate for themselves, it's seen as a lack of compliance. When in fact, really, what it is a child getting the things that they need to be successful, which is really important. So I take it you had an IEP when you were in school. When you
Mhm.
went to college, you had protections under a 504, I would assume, or had worked with your disability office in some way?
Disabilities office, yes.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, because there are protections, of course, moving even to school, or moving to college. It's not necessarily
Yeah,
an IEP, but there
yeah,
certainly is that. But what's important there is that at that point you had to be the advocate for yourself, right?
yeah,
I went through that recently with my son, and they didn't want to hear from me. I wasn't the person that was important to them. They needed my son to go meet with them and tell them what he needed. But
mm,
you're working with kids that are in elementary school and better preparing them to be able to advocate for themselves down the road, whether it be high school or college or another experience. So that's really, really, really nice. So, why a children's book? What drove you to the decision that you were going to create a children's book?
yeah. So when I was in elementary, middle, and high school, everybody told me I should write a book about my life, and it was literally anything that happened in my life. People were like, "You need to write a book." Like kids, other kids my age. It never happened to people that were older than me, but kids my age would be like, "You should write a book. You should write a book." And I never really. I was like, "Okay, whatever." Like I was like 8, like whatever. And then my senior year of high school, I sat in a classroom and I was in multiple classrooms throughout that whole year. And they were teaching differences and disabilities. And in order to teach differences and how differences are negatively, like if we look at differences negatively, they'll have a bad effect throughout history, right? Like every time we've seen differences as a negative or a disability as a negative and always a negative thing, history has shown that it's harmful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different religion, different politics, different whatever. When we look at them negatively, it has led to war, fighting, whatever. But that was the only way they could talk about it was war. Like they
Mm-hmm.
immediately would bring up war. And I was like, the fact that we had to teach about World War II or the Holocaust to teach kids about disabilities is a wild concept. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we make that connection as adults, but trying to explain that to a 7-year-old just makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I went to college, and my second year through, um, one of my professors it uttered to me, "Do you believe everyone around you is neurotypical except for yourself?" And I was like, "Well, no." Do I believe that I'm the only autistic student in your classroom? Yes. And I can confirm that because I've been told that. And I said, "But I do know that a few of my peers." Did I freeze out again? They hit
Just
me on.
briefly, yeah, yeah, just
Okay.
briefly. Yep,
They
a
hit
few.
me
You
on.
I left you on a few of your peers.
Yeah. A few of my peers had dyslexia, things like that. So I was used to that. Um, and we had talked. I mean, we were classmates. And then one of my peers had ADHD, but that was the extent of it. Um, and then I took a class called Global Refugees in my third year because I had to add a history degree because they were preventing me from taking education coursework. Um, due to my communication skills, which are directly related to my autism, which is why I went back and got another diagnosis to confirm my 3-year-old diagnosis was still valid. And then because one of the things I got to do was go and work with refugees. There was 32 kids in this room in 22 different languages. And so I'm trying, and some of those kids spoke 2 or 3 different languages, but different words with each language because they had moved around so much by the time they got to America. And there was no English. And I had to teach 22 different languages, 32 kids in a room. And who knows about learning disabilities, right? Like these kids haven't even had time to get diagnosed. So who knows what's there? And there was a student in a wheelchair. So I knew that there was disability in the classroom. But I was eye-opened, and I went back to an education professor who I did have a close relationship with, who's in the credits of the book. And I said, I think every education major should have to take this class. And she kind of looked at me and was like, why? And I was like, because I've had to work with so many different backgrounds, and I think that would be great for every educator. And they were like, yeah, we did a research paper. You want to read it? And I read this research paper, and as we're talking, she told me I should do one about books good to teach kids about autism, because they did one on books good to teach Americans about refugee students. And so I was, thinking about it, and I talked to her about it, and I started doing research, and every single solitary children's book that was out there was like the mom of, the dad of, the kid of, the sister of, the sibling of, the uncle of, whatever. None of them were written by someone who lived that life. And finally I was like, well, if none of them are, then it must be me. And then I read another one that was actually written by someone with a learning disability. My problem with it was the whole thing was negative. My life's terrible. I hate my world. I'm a puzzle. I'm confusing. I am lost. And I was like, well, that's sad. Like, no one wants to be seen that way when they're 8.
Right.
And so I was like, I want to write a positive perspective about how every day can be challenging, but we can get to the end of the tunnel. I didn't want to make a fantasy, because there are days that are tough as a neurodivergent individual.
Right.
But I wanted to make it clear that there are positives to being neurodivergent as well.
Right. No, I love that. And of course, written as a children's book, I think that's even probably more important than if you're writing a book for adults. I think to share that perspective. So this book is also, of course, illustrated, and we're gonna. Oops, there we go. I missed the camera. We're gonna go through and kind of do a read through here in a minute. Was the illustrator somebody you knew, or how did you find an illustrator? I'm sure that there's a lot of people that would like to write a book, and myself. I have no artistic ability. My daughter is incredibly artistic. I make stick figures, and they're not very good. So how did you come across an illustrator for the book?
Yeah, so when I was on Facebook, I was looking at small businesses and stuff, and me and this girl and I met. She was giving me ideas for my graduation photos, which I wanted to encompass my neurodivergent battles in when I was graduating college. And we became friends. I invited her to a craft show to sell her art, and she had never done one. And so she sold her art and had a great time with me. And then we started doing shows together. And I posted, I was like, I need an illustrator for a children's book that I'm interested in writing. And my amazing friend, Marina, who's down here, she, the one I met, she was like, hey, like, I'm interested in trying, like, how about we work together and we see what happens. And so she started the illustrations in about July of this year and knocked them out by October.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Yeah, and they're excellent illustrations. Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm sure finding somebody, I mean, having a relationship with somebody is probably a really good prerequisite because I mean, it is probably a relationship going through and creating illustrations that kind of get to the experience of what the book is offering. So I'm sure that fact that you already had a relationship was probably helpful as you were thinking about somebody to illustrate the book.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we might kind of transition into we talked about having you do a read through of the book. If you're comfortable doing that, and of course I can hold it up as you're reading,
Okay. Yeah.
but I'll let you read and I can hold, and I'll try to follow the cues for the next page. But we'll kind of give it a read through here.
Yeah, sure. Did you want me to give motivation behind each page, or did you want me to just read it
Let's
through?
just do the read through, and then if
Okay.
you want to talk more about the motivation,
Sure.
we can kind of dive into
Okay.
that.
Sure. So Rocky feels best when things are just right. If her toys aren't lined up or her shoes aren't paired neatly, she feels like the day starts all wrong. She likes to make sure everything is perfect before she leaves for school.
And I'm probably slower than you are here, so bear with me.
Rocky takes the same path to school every day. She feels safe when she knows exactly what's coming next. When things change, it can make her tummy feel funny and her head feel too full. School halls are loud and crowded. Rocky's ears hurt from all the noise, and she wishes she could turn down the volume like on a TV. The bustling makes her want to hide. Rocky likes her desk to be in the same spot because it makes her feel secure. When someone moves her desk, it feels like someone took the floor away and she's falling. Working in groups is tricky for Rocky. She needs more time to think before she talks, and when everyone talks at once, her thoughts get jumbled. Rocky sits in the same spot each day. When someone else is there, it feels like her chair is stolen. She wishes she could explain why the small change upsets her so much. Art class is quiet. Rocky loves painting because she decides where each color goes, and nothing changes unless she wants it to. It's a break from the unexpected. The playground feels chaotic. Games change fast.
Oops, I lost you a little bit on that one.
Oh,
If you could
the
just reread
playground
that.
feels chaotic. Games change fast, and the rules keep switching. Rocky starts to play, but soon steps back to find a quiet spot to feel calm. The library is Rocky's favorite place. It's quiet like a big soft blanket. The books don't buzz, beep, or shout. She can open them like a whisper and close them when she needs quiet. In science, hands-on means surprises, and surprises feel like popping balloons. Rocky feels uneasy about not knowing what will happen next with all the fizzles and pops. Packing her bag at the end of the day is like putting the pieces of the day away. She checks everything twice so she feels ready to leave. Walking home is peaceful. She unwinds by replaying the school day at her own speed. Now she lets go of the parts that were too loud or too fast or too lonely. At home, Rocky feels safe to be herself. She tells her family about her day, the tough parts and the happy moments. Even if they don't understand everything, they listen, and that helps. Rocky sometimes feels the world too brightly or too loudly. She wishes she could explain that loud sounds or sudden changes feel like a scratchy sweater all over her body. Rocky reacts strongly sometimes. She doesn't choose to get upset. Her feelings just rush out before she can stop them, like a sneeze. Rocky tries to manage her big feelings by thinking about her favorite quiet places or by counting colors in the room, which helps her feel grounded. Rocky wishes her friends understood that she isn't being weird or mean on purpose. She reacts in the only way she knows when things feel too much.
All right, it looks like you froze up on me there a little bit, so we'll just give this a second. The internet is not. There we go. All right, you're back.
Rocky feels grateful when her teachers notice she's struggling and give her a little space or time. It's like they turn down the volume of the whole world. Every day, Rocky faces moments that are tougher for her than for others. She works hard to handle them, even when she can't say why it's hard. Even with her efforts, her classmates sometimes don't get why she acts the way she does. It can make her feel lonely, like she's speaking a language only she understands. Sometimes kids tease Rocky because they think she sees things differently than them. They don't see the invisible weight she lifts every day, and their words make it even harder to carry. When kids are mean, Rocky feels like crawling into a shell where no one can find her. She doesn't tell adults because it's hard to find the words. Rocky doesn't know how to ask for help clearly. She often feels stuck, unsure how to tell others what she needs to feel better. Rocky and her teacher come up with secret signals, like a special card she can hold up when things are too much. It's her way of saying, "Please help me," without words. When things get overwhelming, Rocky finds peace in being alone. It helps her reset her heart and mind at her own speed. Every morning, Rocky hopes for a day where she feels understood. While each day carries challenges, she also finds small victories in managing better than the day before. At night, Rocky sometimes feels sad because she can't share all her thoughts. She worries about the next day, hoping it will be easier. Her parents and teachers work together to find better ways to support her. They all want school to feel safe, like her favorite quiet corners of the world. In class, Rocky sometimes feels like she's still on her own. She faces each day bravely, knowing some parts will always be tough. Rocky starts each day fresh, armed with hope and her special tools. She knows she's different, and that's okay. She's learning a little at a time how to share her world with others.
All right. And we have reached the end here. I appreciate you reading through that. And as I was listening to it, I read it when I got it, and as I was listening to it, it just, I don't know, somehow sometimes listening for me just brings things in a different way. But there's so much here that you're doing aside from sharing your experience. I mean, you're also talking about what works, and like you mentioned, that idea of like this isn't just about everything that's terrible and how it's this is acknowledging challenges and then talking about like well something that makes you feel grounded or offering strategies. So beautifully illustrated. I think so important to share your experience and story, and I love your inspiration for this, kind of realizing that there were a lot of books out there written by parents and caregivers and others, but really I think the voice of experience, the voice of lived experience is so critical. So I'm really excited that you decided to do this. I have a question for you, and we can talk more about some of the specifics in the book. Have you shared this with your students?
I have. I got to read it on morning announcement, so all 300 kids got to hear
That's
it.
awesome. That's awesome. Did you get any response from anybody in any of your classes or?
Very
Uh,
much.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's great. That's great.
Yes.
Well, and I think I'm curious, certainly in sharing this and sharing your experience, you've kind of shared your own individual differences, right? You've shared a little bit about your background. And I have to imagine that, for students in your class that you're working with that have maybe had some of the experiences that you talked in the book, that's got to feel very validating.
Yes. Yeah. All of my students want a copy.
Yeah.
Like, and
They,
it,
they, they need a signed copy, for their
yes, of
from their
course.
famous teacher.
Um, yeah, all of my students, they're like, "Oh my gosh, when do we get our copy?" So yes, they loved it. I had a middle school girl come up to me, and now I'm writing the middle school version of this book
I saw that in a
about my
post.
story.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the reason is this middle school girl came up to me in a tea shop that I did a book signing at, and she read the whole thing, sixth grader.
Mm.
And she said, "I relate to this so much." She said, "Is this girl in middle school?" And I said, uh, "This girl."
Bear with us for 1 second. We're okay.
There you
There we
go.
go. Okay.
I said
It
if
must
you
be
relate
school
to it,
internet. I'm going to blame it
yeah,
on the school internet.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I
So
said, but
ask
if
the
you relate to it, I guess it could be for any age, right?
right.
Um, and she was just like, you should write the middle school version,
Mm-hmm.
because so many middle school kids would relate to this. And I said, do you have an IEP or 504? And the student said no. And I said, oh, wow. And she said, but I did. And I said, okay, interesting. I said, I did in elementary, but didn't in middle or high. Uh, and because 6th through 12th, I didn't have one. And I said, um, you know, I didn't realize, I guess, how many people out there, after 5th grade, they go, you've achieved things academically. You're good. Your disability doesn't affect you anymore. And they throw you out into the real world and expect you to live.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened to me.
Yeah, and it shouldn't, right? I had a very personal experience just recently. My daughter has anxiety, and we approached about a 504. And very early on, she was led to believe because she had good grades, she wouldn't qualify for an 504, which is absolutely untrue. Disability doesn't go away because you have good grades, but very often, like your story, it does. People pull that out, and there may still be supports and accommodations that you need, even though you are academically able to, stay on track. That's not what this is about. But there's a lot of misconceptions, and often in schools around that. And it's just, I mean, it's documented in federal guidance. It is not based on, academics, but that's a frustrating thing that often happens. And I think people lose needed supports. Oh, and you're going to say something, and right there, we got cut off. I don't know why we're having some internet hiccups here today, so bear with us. Hopefully, there we go.
I think the biggest thing is when I got off my IEP, it was treated as I won an award by everyone. Like everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, you're finally IEP free!" Like it was like getting out of prison. Like literally, it literally felt like I just got out of prison. Like, you're finally free, And I think, in 9th grade, they were going to put me back on one. There was a consideration because my highest grade at one point was a 52. Because 6th, 7th, and 8th, I was student council president. I was a straight A student. I was, everything. And then I got to middle school and I just failed and I fall into this depression. I had no friends and I was just, and they were going to put me back on. There was talk about putting me back on an IEP, but again, in my mind at that point when I was 14, it was almost as if someone was like, we're throwing you back in jail.
Right. I mean, especially the way they treated it before, right? By saying, hey, you're done with this. And that's not what it should be. I mean, we can get accommodations and supports all throughout life in different settings and different areas, and we can make choices about the things that we need to support ourselves and our own health as we become adults. I've always hated that argument of like, well, what about the real world? Well, what about the real world? The real world actually can be accommodating. Colleges, are required to follow the federal law around 504. Employers have responsibilities around there as well. I hate when the idea of needing an accommodation or support is looked at through that lens, because that's not healthy.
Yeah, no, it is. And not only that, but it's one of those things where it's like, in the real world, regardless of accommodations in a work spot or whatever, I can choose and I can choose to do, right? Like I can choose not to drive highways because of my foot problems. Like I can make that decision. So I do have accommodations. I'm just creating them on my behalf,
Right. And I think increasingly there are things, I remember arguments like, well, how's this child going to do in a crowded grocery store? Well, guess what? You can have your groceries delivered to you if you want to today. There's a lot of the world. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can design our own accommodations in some cases, but there's a lot of protections out there still for people in various critical environments, like employees, like employment, college, and it's it's a perfectly a good thing to know what your needs are and advocate for those. And again, I love that you're doing that as an educator. I want to take a quick stop here and just say, anybody that's watching live, and I know we've got a number of people that have been watching live as we've been talking. Feel free in the chat to let us know who you are and where you're from. I see a friend of ours from Australia. So Becca, you got to know that when we do these things, we have people from all over the world that often join in. And I see Marion, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is in Australia. But anyone that's on live, let us know who you are and where you're from. It's always fun to see where people are joining us from. If you happen to have any questions or comments, put those in the chat as well. I will share with you, Beck, a couple of comments here. Marion said, thank you. Amazing. And this was as we were finishing up the reading here. Monica said, thank you. That was great. I will share with the families I work with. Had another comment here. Beautiful story. For sharing knowledge and wisdom with adults who need to know, understand this. Thank you. Okay, Monica's from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Great to have you here. Yeah, and I was thinking too that all your kids do need a copy of your book, so maybe we can find somebody that's got a little grant money to buy books for your school or something. That'd be a nice thing to do. So anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat now. And otherwise, we're going to go on with a couple things here. So you had asked me as we went to read this if I wanted you to tell me anything about kind of what was behind things. And I'm not going to make you go by page here, but anything in particular that you would like to share or point out, or anything below, one of these scenarios that you'd like to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah. So what really, I base this off of my life, but I also base it off some students I've had to encounter. Art was never my thing, but I had a student who loved being in the art classroom. And then the library was not necessarily my thing because I struggled with reading, but I had a kiddo who was in first grade reading at a college reading level. And she was just inspiring. She was autistic, would scream under desks, but the second you threw her in a library, you would never hear a peep. She would read every book in that library if you let her. But she did not want to touch math. And see, I was the other way around. I loved math, but give me a book and I wasn't doing it. And so I tried to, base it off multiple experiences. However, the desk being in the same spot is based off me. My teacher in 5th grade would go, everybody change your desk today. Hey guys, you can move your desk with friends. Hey, you can move your desk with friends. And this happened like every other week. And I didn't have friends to move my desk with. So what I would end up doing is I would put my desk in the middle of the carpet and I would sit alone. And everybody else was in a group of 6. And a group would feel guilty and they wanted to look good for the teacher. And the teacher would say, who wants a piece of candy if they let Rebecca sit with them or whatever. And I would move my desk with a group. And then they'd go, oh, you're negative and mean. And they would push my desk away every morning until we changed groups again. And the same process would happen. And then I would try to do group work with that group and I couldn't get along with them, or I didn't know what they were talking about because they would talk about their friends and I didn't have friends. And then the cafeteria thing also, I loved assigned seating in the cafeteria and everyone thought I was crazy. But it's because people were forced to talk to me, right? I was the only person next to them, so they had to talk to me. And it gave me a way to socialize. And then the playground thing as well is very much based off a real story. All of the people I did consider friends at different points of my school career played kickball. I hated kickball. I still do. It makes no sense to me. We would have a kickball tournament every year as well in elementary school. And they would change the rules or, something would change and my brain would just go whoa, I don't understand. And then the science as well is based off my own story. The popping and the bubbling and the sizzling. I don't even teach science today. I teach reading and math because the overstimulation of the kids freaking out and everything, I couldn't do it.
Yeah. I love as you were starting to talk about this, how you talked about some of these experiences are yours, but some of them are experiences based off others that you've known. And it brings up a really important point that all too often gets lost is that, people think about autism, and I think that, well, everybody falls into this bucket. Everybody presents like this, looks like this. And, I've always felt like that, I don't know who said it, but the idea that, if you meet one person with autism, you met one, autistic person, right? I mean, every individual is different. And yes, there are some things that, there's enough in here that's relatable to experiences that other people may have experienced. But at the same time, it really is individualized, and everybody is different in terms of the things that they feel. But you hit on so many different things here that I think it does make it probably relatable for a lot of people that might, look at the book.
Yeah.
So what's the timeline for the middle school book?
I want to release it probably around next October-ish.
Okay.
My goal is one book a year. I just got in touch with a high school kid who is an illustrator with autism.
Okay.
So I'm looking at him doing the front cover and back cover of that.
Mm.
And then I have another girl who I was connected with through a magazine. And she's already released books, but she is very strong in illustration, and her illustrations are super realistic, and she's also autistic.
Oh, wow. I love that. I love that. Yeah.
I'm looking at her to do my children's book, which is going to be my next children's book, A Step Into My Basket, which is grocery shopping as an autistic individual.
Okay.
Yeah, and having to, make sure foods don't cause problems with your behavior, and making
sure.
All the colors, the lights, and the air, all that. The words are already written for each. I just have to get the pictures done and compile.
Yeah. What kind of process is that? I mean, is that, having a conversation, talking about what something looks like, and then, the illustrator kind of going off and coming up with something, and you saying, well, yeah, or no, or how does that work?
So, I always believe in the illustrator's ability to do their own art form.
Okay. Yep.
Just like myself. Like for this book, I gave my illustrator like almost no commentary. I gave an idea of what I thought the words meant to myself.
Right.
And then I said, go for it.
Yeah.
That was literally what happened. So once it was drawn, like I didn't say, oh, I don't like that, redo it. Because nobody did that with my writing.
Right.
And so I made sure that, I kind of encompassed how I interpreted my wording. And then I had them go for it. But I think in my next book, I want to encompass more stimming. And so my goal with the grocery store book and my middle school version is to encompass different stems, like the finger tapping, and
Gotcha.
hand rubbing, and the flapping, and
Sure. Now, am I mistaken? I have some memory here, and of course, you've been a volunteer with the Alliance, and we're connected on social media, so I get a little bit of a picture into your life as well, just through those connections. But do I remember you writing some poetry or some other things as well? You want to talk a little bit about any of that?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been in 7 poetry anthologies, and all of my poetry is based off my own life. I have pieces about self-love. I have pieces about being grateful to be alive. I have pieces about battles within. I have pieces about being neurodivergent. They're all out there. And they're under Lauren Brill. She's the founder of the Unseal, which is a $5 a month poetry community. And she is absolutely incredible. But yeah, so she publishes our poetry based on choosing us in a competition. So the fact that I've been published 7 times hints that I've won 7 of those competitions.
Yeah. I remember seeing some accolades for your writing. I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah.
So we know the middle school book, but and you're now is this your first year teaching? Your first year okay. So this is your first year teaching. What's on the roadmap for you? I mean, where do you see yourself kind of as you look forward? And, you are somebody that has, given your age here, even accomplished a great deal, in your life. What's next for you, Becca?
Yeah. So I finished my master's in August and hopefully start my doctoral degree.
Okay.
However, probably after my doctorate, maybe midway through, I do want to eventually leave the classroom and possibly do like autism specialist for a district, something in the policy realm for a district, maybe even go up into the legislature and advocate for policy for our special education students. Um, my master's will be in educational leadership and policy with a focus on government and nonprofit tracks. So my strong suit so far is in the nonprofit area and advocating for policy in the nonprofit sector. And my concentration, I guess, is ed psychology. So that's kind of my area is the SPED ed psych policy.
Two questions in different directions, but I'll just start with one of them.
Sure.
In terms of, as an autistic educator, who is working with, probably autistic children, other neurodivergent children, there's such a seemingly a great strength in that understanding and that experience, even though everyone is different. There's understanding, again, I mean, stepping in my shoes, right? It's walking in my shoes. What, and you talked about kind of at some point, even, autistic, kind of an autism specialist or something like that. What kind of advice, even though, I mean, you're just getting started in your teaching career, but you get to observe students in different settings now, and I don't want to put you in the spot, but I mean, what kind of general advice might you give to educators? So as an autistic educator supporting neurodivergent students, what kind of things do you think that educators should be doing to better support? And of course, as a student as well, because you lived your own experience, but now you're on the other side. Yeah. What kind of advice do you have for our educators out there? We've got a lot of educators that are part of our community.
I think as an autistic educator specifically, I think a lot of neurotypical individuals define things as behaviors. And I've been told, oh, the student shows these behaviors. And I'm like, oh, that's not a behavior. That just is like part of who they are. Like, and so I think, like stimming, right? Like to me, that's not a behavior. Like that's just my body trying to release emotion. Like that's like crying. That's not a behavior. Like, or, sneezing. We're not like, oh, they sneeze. Like, ooh,
right.
So I think, ignore comments about like warnings, like when other teachers are like, oh, here's a warning about this kid, like definitely keep it here, but don't take it for forte. Like you're going to build a completely new relationship with this kid, and it's hard. Like it's very hard to be like, oh, this is how they define this student. I've heard it from 12 teachers, but really try your best to avoid a created interpretation. I mean, I've had many kids throughout my whole daycare experience, teaching experience, whatever, where people are like, yeah, this kid hits and screams and cries and whatever. And then they get to my room or they get to be my student or they get to be my tutoring kid or whatever. And I'm like, no, they don't do any of that. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I've never seen any of that. And it's because of the relationship I built with them. And, there's no reason for them to do that in my room. They're not forced to do anything. I'm not going to, if they're crying, I'm not forcing them to get up and come do.
Oops. Okay. Lost you there briefly. We'll give you a second to hopefully come back.
I think as an adult, we have the choice to go, I'm going to do my schoolwork right now. Oh, I'm not going to do my schoolwork right now, because so many things are outside assignments. Kids don't get that choice. So if they need 10 minutes to chill, I'm going to give them 10 minutes to chill.
Right.
But, students will join you when they're ready if you create the relationship that, this is for their own benefit, not yours, right? Yeah. Like them doing their math assignment isn't because I need a grade. It's because I want them to learn this math topic, and they'll do it when they're ready for it. And I feel like so many teachers hold things over their head. Oh, this assignment's a grade, it's not a ghost. Stop holding it over their head,
Right. Well, and I think the point you were making too about, not predetermining things is really important because the things that we think influence our actions and our actions then influence what other people think about themselves and that influences their actions. So like just making, just coming in with that idea like, oh, well, I've been warned that this kid is going to do X, Y, and Z. The thoughts that you put into place after that can actually affect the outcomes. So it's really important. I mean, it really is important. And you go in there and you give a kid a blank slate, and you work and you get to know them and you build that relationship. That relationship is so critical. And so many of our kids are kids that really depend on and need that connection and relationship. And if you're, hanging these ideas over your head about who you think they are, you may prohibit yourself from actually getting to know them.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So tell me about the policy space. So kind of looking at that as another avenue down the road, and we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. But as we look down the road in the policy space, are there any policies or directions that you would like to see things head? And I've got some ideas there, believe it or not. But you tell me about what your thoughts are in terms of some policies you would love to be part of helping to bring forward.
As I'm sure we're on the same page with this one, seclusion and restraint need to be banned. I think we also need to redefine what we consider seclusion and restraint. If a door handle is 6 foot and the kid is 2 foot, even though you're not blocking off that door, that's still restraining.
Yep.
That's still seclusion. That's locked.
Right.
And to them, that's locked. They're not getting out.
Right.
And so, as we know in Texas, that's completely illegal. The only things that define locked in Texas are a door blocking the door, a chair blocking the door, or a person or a physical object blocking the door. But it doesn't include that something's way too high for the kid to reach.
Right.
And then I think we need to redefine and relook at CPI training, which is that restraint training. I feel like it's used way too often. And then in terms of other policies, curriculum, I think is a big deal. I think what we're teaching has many flaws for so many kids with updated technology. A kid's ability to, do addition and subtraction, once they understand the main concept, I feel like a calculator isn't harming anyone. You know what I mean? Like if they have the number sense of 5 and 4, then they can know 5 plus 4 is 9, and they've gotten to that point. I feel like, why don't we let them save that time by pulling it out for 5 plus 4 to get it quick down?
Right.
And I can go through that all day with every equation. But
my son, I'm laughing because my son was actually good at math. He hated math, but was good at math. But what he really hated is if you gave him a worksheet with 20 problems, and basically, all of them were the same basic thing, just different numbers. After he did 2 or 3 of them, he's like, I don't need to do any more. Like, I know how to do this, right? So for him, that was a really big frustration that you would make him go through and do all these other ones when in fact, he was like, it's just unnecessary. I know how to do this.
There's a really good book that I got to help contribute to. I'm not an author of or anything, but I got to help contribute my commentary when I was like 15 years old. It's called School Reform by John Merrifield. He's a former economics professor. And what the book really digs into is looking at a student's interest area and designing their school around their interest, and sending kids to schools designed around their interest and their special areas and their strengths. And you're learning the subjects, but it's designed around your core interest areas, right? Like, what if, like, I'm a knitter, right? I knit all the time. What if everything I learned was with like yarn and color? How much stronger would I be at math? And it's a really interesting read. Obviously, it would be unrealistic to go that in.
Right.
But if a teacher could zone into me that much, how much better would the outcome of our kids be?
Well, even just the prerequisite to that, which is getting to know the kid, right? Getting to know what the kid likes, values, enjoys, whatever it may be, building that amount of, and I get it. I mean, I understand it can be difficult if you've got 25 kids, but it's time well spent, getting to know kids and what they like, what they don't like, what their interests are. Having them feel like the things that are important to them are important.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Um, and then right now I'm doing a policy brief for a presentation conference in February. Um, and it's all around the Bluebonnet learning curriculum that just passed in Texas, and everyone has mixed ideas on that. Personally, I'm not a fan. And it's just a religious implemented curriculum. I'm looking at the cons and pros of it though. When I've
For
looked into
the
it.
public school system.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. And there's been arguments that it's good for uncertified teachers as they get their certification, because it gives them curriculum that is non-religious as well, because it's a mix. Like, it's slowly they implement Christianity randomly throughout it. But like the math doesn't have religion, right? Like, it's like the reading does. There's, not a fan of it. But
right.
The whole idea is that people have argued, even people who aren't necessarily for that, have argued that it's good for uncertified teachers because they're given a curriculum and what they have to teach. However, people have also argued that it doesn't matter, it's bad and negative, and we can. But yeah, I mean, that's a scary thought, and it's already been passed. It's already in setting for the next school year.
Well, I mean, I would have to think there could be some additional
Yeah.
legal challenges there.
I would hope so, but they're giving an extra $44 right now per child if the school district decides to implement it, because they're not forcing it; it's a choice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been a great conversation, and I really appreciate you joining me to not only talk about the book, but read through the book. And I look forward to seeing the middle school version of this. As we're wrapping up here today, because I don't want to keep you too long. I told you we'd take about an hour. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave us with as we wrap up today?
No, I'm happy that I got to share my story and my journey, and I hope all of you enjoyed it. All thoughts and views, of course, that I shared today are my own and not representative of anyone else. I just want to make that clear, because the world's crazy. But yeah.
We can agree on that for sure. The world has gotten to be a crazy place for sure. Listen, your work, your life that you've shared, and your journey, I think, are really valuable, and I appreciate all that you're doing to help and support other kids and kids that might be going through things that are similar to what you experienced. And this is important work. I love that you're in education. I love having autistic representation in education as well. I think that's really critical.
Yeah.
So, thank you for all of that and all of the things that you're doing. And I know that we'll be looking forward to seeing what comes next and, sharing more. So thanks so much for being here with me today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to let everybody else go, and I'll just ask you to stick around for a second. But thank you to all our viewers, and please, again, share these, and make people aware. It always is helpful to kind of tell other people about things that we're doing and things that work. And I'd love to see Becca selling more copies of the book as well, and leave a review too, because that's always helpful. I know that reviews can be helpful. Leave a review if you get one, and thank you for joining us today. So we'll let you go, and we'll see you again soon. I don't know when. I don't have the calendar in front of me, but we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.